Okay, let me start by saying that I was asked to talk about facades, and I want to start by remembering one of the phrases, a sentence that was said this morning in the presentation by Françoise, the moderator, saying that speaking about facades is having different points of views. Our point of view and the way that I'm going to introduce this presentation is by talking about facades that are always linked to the idea that generated the project. So I'm going to very quickly speak about the projects. I'm going to very quickly speak about the projects in order for you to understand better the facade. For us, working in facades really is working about materiality, trying to work with different materials, trying to experiment with light, natural, artificial light, and also, in many times, working with artists and engineers, different people than architects. But basically, our facades are linked to the idea that generated and created the project. Like in San Sebastián, a museum in San Sebastián, where we linked it to the landscape behind. Or a museum in Córdoba, Contemporary Art Center, where it was linked to the geometry of the surrounding buildings. Or in Bristol, where the facade was linked to the creation of public space. Or in the city of Guangzhou, that we look to the ancient architecture, or in Hamburg, in the House of Mont Blanc, that we were looking to writing. So here is San Sebastián, an extension for a museum, the San Telmo Museum in San Sebastián, that was the extension of an existing old building of the 14th century. So for us, it was important to understand that we are working there in the intersection between natural and urban space. And it was important to understand it because here you see an old photograph of San Sebastián and a new one, and you can see that the natural space was kept there during the years. So we decided to work in the convent by restoration and to create a new building for the extension that was quite a big one, exactly in the interstitial space between the convent and the natural space. Of course, the facade was very important here because it was the facade, the one that was going to re-establish the connection between natural and urban space. Here is the extension of the building so that you can understand it up there and the convent, and of course a long facade that not only related to the existing building, but that came out also to the city and redid the image of the plaza that was going to lead to the mountain behind. In this facade, we work with the San Sebastian artists, Leopoldo Ferran and Agustina Otero. With them, we went to the mountain beside, and we saw this situation of the rock, a rock that was eroded by the wind and by the sea, and the greenery was coming out. And we wanted to translate that to our facade. We worked with aluminum panels with perforations from which the greenery was going to come out. So the facade, as you see it in the distance, you can imagine that it's a one single piece, because the pattern of the facade is a continuous one. When you get nearer to it, you see that it's a variation of 5 different panels, 5 different perforated aluminum panels with different perforations, from 0 perforations to 260, and the panels are mounted 3 by 3 in correlation, so in order to create a continuous facade, except in the doors that are mounted 1 by 1. The facade runs through all the building, establishing this relation between old and new. And I put it here without the greenery because in some places we also left the perforations open in order to introduce inside the natural light and also to make this lighting during the night, that it's also the lighting of the buildings and of the plaza. I put this image in order for you to understand the very thin space in which we were working. So this situation, this geometry, also goes inside the building, and in the new spaces, the new exhibition spaces that are long and thin and are related in scale and shape to the cloister and to the and also to the scale of the principal nave of the church of the convent. For us, it's important always, when we are working with existing architecture, to have contemporary and existing architecture in connection, but always the two architectures with a distance of respect, like the continuation of this stair, and in the same way as we are working with these facades, one in relation to the other, but not touching and creating this distance of respect. The facade coming out to the plaza and creating this new facade to the plaza that during the night transform itself in a light installation. During the day, the greenery grows in different ways, so that also the facade changes during the different times of the year. From San Sebastian and these perforated panels, we are going to go to another facade, the Contemporary Art Center in Córdoba, that's also done by panels, in this case, prefabricated GRC panels. We are now working in Córdoba, in a place on the other side of the old town, on the other side of the river of the old town of Córdoba, very near a wonderful building, the Mosque of Córdoba. The Mosque of Córdoba has this impressive inside that creates an amazing space with, by the repetition and variation of one single element, the double arch. Also for us, it was extremely interesting to see this very apparently complex geometry that was generated in the different trellises and celluses of the building, that is also extended to all the ceilings of the Arab architecture. So for us, it was thinking, could we generate a building by applying the same kind of concepts? So we started working with an hexagon that we divided in three, of 90 square meters, 60 and 30, that refer to the different exhibition areas that we had to create for the building. By making symmetries and rotation, enjoying the different hexagons together, we generated a non-hierarchical space, a space that could be used in many different ways, from 1 to 9 different exhibition areas. This geometry is the one that was going to create the center of the building. The orange area is the area that is organized for the exhibitions. The area up is the vestibule that can connect to the different exhibition areas, and the area down is the place where the artists are in residence. Because this is not a museum, it's a contemporary art place where the artists produce the art and then they leave it there for the exhibition. This geometry was also taken to the section, and it was around these hexagons that we introduced the light through skylights. So the geometry is also taken to solve the roof, really the fifth facade, that, as you see, was solved in the same way in this model, that was also, this same geometry was also taken to the facade. A building with 4 facades, 2 long ones, this one to the river, and this other one to the city. The entrance of the building was produced in the 2 shorter facades through, as you see, the cutouts. The facade to the river, it's an opaque facade with very little perforations. They are GRC panels, the same as in the front facade. In this case, they are perforated so that the light can come in to give light to the offices that are behind. The inside of the building has a more rough materiality because it's the gray concrete, and the light is coming in through the skylights. As you see here, that line reflects the different doors through which the different exhibition areas can be separated. The building also speaks about compressions and expansions of space, and in these big areas is where the different uses get together, like here, to the entrance of the black box or to the entrance of the offices above. Offices that are built with glass and that allow, during some times of the day, the light to go in and also to reflect the geometry of the facade, of the perforated facade to the city. The other facade, the opaque facade with very little perforations, in which you see this dancer that is trying to dance with the rays of light that are coming in through that facade, because here is a performing arts center, as I said before. The artists come here to experiment. The building is in complete use now, and you can see this is a sculpture of Yoko Ono, and the dancers simply investigating in a different way of dancing. As I said before, the roof was solved in the same way. With these hexagons, sometimes are patios, sometimes are introducing the light through skylights. And it is these same hexagons that are taken to the facade. An opaque facade during the day of GRC panels that during the night transform itself in a facade that is lighted by light, and that from the distance it works as a media facade. A media facade with 1,500 pixels that correspond to each one of the hexagons. This is a small video of when the facade was designed. Here we worked with a studio of architects and engineers and artists from Berlin that was called Realities United. The facade is done also by the variation and repetition of 13 different panels. These panels are of 16 centimeters width, and in each one of them we installed a couple of LED lights. These LED lights reflect in a different way in the different inclinations of the hexagons of the facade. It's a black and white light because we wanted to be black and white. So in the distance, looking to the other side of the river, the facade can produce images. As I said before, 1,500 pixels, and also the facade is divided into 3 different dimensions of hexagons. One big one, medium scale, and small scale. From the other side of the river, we were also trying to use the reflection on the river. Now, actually, there is a big vegetation and you cannot see the reflection, but when the building was started, we could see this reflection. When we come back and we get near to the facade, you see really the way that is done, the hexagons that reflect in different ways with the LED light. But you can also imagine also the images that we can produce, like these eyes that now are saying goodbye, and we go to the next project, from this facade in Cordoba to this other one that was a competition in Bristol for a hospital that was written in the newspapers to be as an ugly hospital. We did not know if we wanted to enter in this competition or not, because it was only designed in a facade. And as I say, we thought that the facades are linked to the concept of the building. But in this case, it was a little bit like a challenge, because we did not think that the building was a bad building or an ugly building. When you looked at it at the original image, it's a clear building with a very good, with a very good rhythm of windows. The problem really of the building was that it had awful maintenance and a very ugly extensions. So for us, it was a matter of creating a veil, a new veil that through different cuts turned into three-dimensional, so that it could be included the extensions that had been added to the building on one side, and on the other side, creating a new public space. This is the geometry that we planned, and here is the upper facade and the lower facade. When it opens, it incorporates the extension, and on the other side, it creates this small public area, an area of relaxation in the front of the building. Here is the new facade. As you see, the upper part respects completely the initial dimension of the old building. In the lower part, when the facade separates from the building, the rhythm changes in order to adapt itself to the different conditions of the now existing building. As you see, you can see the dimension when the facade separates through some of the shadows at some times of the day. Here, the facade, when it touches the floor, when it touches the ground, it comes more dense in order to protect the inside spaces and to create this small but new public space, a place to relax before the entrance of the hospital, which is a children's hospital, and here the separation of the facade from the very busy street of Bristol. And from Bristol, let's go to China, to the city of Guangzhou, where we won a competition, a second one, but this is the one that was built first, a competition for an office building. And we turned our eyes to the ancient architecture of Guangzhou that we already knew from working from there in different times. We thought that these roofs and these tiles were very beautiful, so we were looking to this kind of ceramic in order to propose to use a similar kind of this ceramic in the facade. The building was a building for offices, for the railway company, and also a commercial center in the lower part. So we decided to use two different geometries that by overlapping itself were going to create the new building. The bars were perfect for the office space, and the other geometry, the geometry with the pentagons, was going to cross with the bars and was going to generate an open space of courtyards that allowed in the basement and the ground floor to have an open building with a commercial area that was required. This is the model, maybe you can understand it better there, and the rest of the pentagons coming out of the building are for the bigger necessities of the office spaces in the office building. But it was the first time that we built in China. We did not know how this was going to be built. So we tried to work in a facade that was going to be easily done, and that if a mistake was produced, could be redone easily. So we worked in a ceramic facade that was based on only one single piece, and the variation of both height and the program of the facade was done by the addition of different pieces. So we had different heights by adding 3, 4, or 5 pieces, and the variation of the facade was done by coloring and adding 1 element, 2 elements, or 3 elements. We used this unseen geometry in order to produce the piece of ceramic, and this was the model and the piece of ceramic that was produced. And here, this photograph is from the last time that I was in China, and I cannot resist to put these two photographs, the last time I was in China and the first time I was there. And it was really the warriors of terracotta that I went to see the first time. And this way of working, I guess it was lucky for us, because when the pandemic came, we could not go back to China. So the building was built without us being there. And it was built through a wonderful Chinese architect that was working in our office and now stayed in China. But I have to say, I'm showing this, and I don't show this building very much because I have to recognize that I haven't seen it personally. And for me, it's strange to have a building built without having been able to be there to really see it and to really see how it's finished. I only hope that the strategy of having an easy facade to build really worked well. And from China, let's come back to Europe and to go to Hamburg to see the house for Mont Blanc. This is the city of Hamburg, where is that place is Altona, an industrial area where the Mont Blanc company has its industrial base. So we entered this competition for the house of Mont Blanc in order to make a house that was going to be like a museum for writing, that was going also to take into consideration the logo of the city of Mont Blanc, which is the Mount Mont Blanc, and of course the beautiful pens that are produced by the company. So that is the place that we were working, an industrial area, and the parking there, it's the place that we were giving for the new building. So we decided to make a long linear building in order to create a new facade for the old industry and separate it from the parking space with a new garden, with a small mountain, so in order to avoid seeing the cars. To make the building, we looked to the beautiful cases that hold the pens of Mont Blanc. These pens that are inside the case, a really straightforward element that in the inside has the complexity to generate that beautiful writing. So for us, it was the same. This is the model that we presented to the competition. A building, a case for a pen, that when it's open, in its inside, it has the complexity to organize the new building. A straightforward facade that in its inside had a section around a bolted area that organized the exhibition areas around it. The facade was done also by prefabricated concrete panels. This is one of the working drawings, and during the construction we had different mock-ups in order to be able to study the color, the light, the way that the facade was folding, and also the ways that the different layers of the facade. Here is the built building in which you see a facade of concrete panels with different layers unfolding one on top of the other. For us, the facade is like the trace of a line that follows the pen in the hand. But at the same time, of course, it also relates to the logo of the company of Montblanc. Different layers with different foldings on it in order to create the shadows to make the difference and to be able to follow the lines. A cantilevered building that in the lower part really holds the more public areas, like the cafeteria and the shop, and of course the entrance to the building. Entrance that you enter in a completely, the same as in the other project, in a completely different space, a white space. Here is the vault from which we have hanging a sculpture of paper. Around the vault, the circulation, the stairs that lead you to the upper part, and from these corridors that already have written exhibitions, you access to the two different exhibition areas, one for the pens, for the objects, and another one for the written papers. Continuing up the building, you get to the core of the building, a hanged element over the dome that really holds the archive for the most precious objects of Montblanc. An archive that we want to relate to the facade in the outside. The facade that for us is like the hand that holds the pen and follows the trace of the pen, but that during the night maybe it's more obvious of the light, but of course, and going back to the same sentence in which I started and with the same image in which I started, different points of views, you can see many things here, like the logo of Montblanc, and I hope that you can see, of course, other things, because complexity in architecture, I think, is what is needed. Thank you very much.